Caroline Snowrow was at a retail store in Leicester when her 9-month-old baby began to cry. She immediately knew that it was time to feed her and then proceeded to cover her with a blanket and nurse her child. However, one of the workers in the store did not agree with her and told her that she couldn't breastfeed there and needed to leave. She knew her rights and stood her ground and told him that she could legally breastfeed wherever she needed to and she was properly covered up. He then took the child off of her chest and said, "If you want your baby back, you'll follow me." Good evening. My name is Katie Wheeler, and I'll be telling you about my senior project, Blankets for Newborns. There are many benefits for breastfeeding for the child that are not always recognized. The first being that the mother's body adjusts to what the child needs and meets the circumstances. So a mother's body knows when her baby is sick. So it'll give the right nutrition and right protein for the child to nurse it back to health. Colostrum is the first milk that is produced throughout the stages of breastfeeding, and it's produced within the first 24 hours and sometimes lasts for about 2 days. It's very high in nutrients and protein, and it's very good for the baby at the first start. Preterm milk is produced if a woman has a preterm child. This is even higher in nutrients and proteins, and like stated before, it adjusts to the circumstances of the child and gives it exactly what it needs to grow. Because as a preterm baby, they need more protein and nutrients. Transitional milk is between colostrum and mature milk. It's just a mixture of those two milks, and it replaces colostrum anywhere from 24 to 48 hours after giving birth. Then there's mature milk. This replaces transitional milk somewhere around 72 hours after giving birth. Last is high milk. It's considered the next best thing to colostrum because it's very high in nutrients and protein as well, and it's very good for the baby. The supply varies for each child, so each child needs something different, and unlike formula, breast milk changes depending on what that child needs. It is also digested easier by the child. Like any other milk, breast milk has lactose, but it's higher in protein, so it's easier for the child to digest. It's also easier on the kidneys than cow's milk. Susan Frederick said it best when she said that this powerful fluid contains more protein, minerals, salt, vitamin A, nitrogen, white blood cells, and antibodies than mature milk, and it's just what a child needs to get off to a great start. In the U.S., almost 80% of mothers begin with breastfeeding, but sadly, only about half of them continue without switching to formula. This is sad because one of the best things to be giving to a child is that colostrum within the first 24 hours. There are also many benefits for the mother as well. They're non-nutritive, meaning they have no nutritional value, but they're still very good benefits. Demonstration is the first one. When a woman chooses to do exclusive breastfeeding, which is where she breastfeeds for 6 months without switching in formula, this can cause her not to menstruate for the overall time of breastfeeding. Next is breast milk is always ready. The mother doesn't have to stop and make a bottle in order to feed her child. She can just cover up and nurse whenever she needs to. Next is it's also less time consuming because you don't have to stop and prepare that bottle or clean up after you have used the bottle, so there's less to clean up. It's also convenient to know that you don't have to take that extra time and listen to your child cry while you're trying to make a bottle. You can just stop, cover up, and continue what you're doing while you're nursing your child. Infant bonding is another really big benefit. This is skin-to-skin contact early on in the child's life. This is a benefit because it forms an attachment between the mother and child. Losing weight. Mothers tend to turn to supplements or diet pills after having a child because they want to lose all that weight that they gained during their pregnancy. But that's hard on their body, and breastfeeding is actually a very natural and healthy way to lose that weight because it takes a lot of calories and a lot of energy to do this, so it's burning the fat that you gained during your pregnancy. It also reduces risk. So breastfeeding reduces the risk of postpartum depression, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and even softens the risk of breast cancer. It's also cheaper. So even if a mother chooses to pump, it is a lot cheaper to buy the few things you need to do that rather than paying for formula whenever you need it and the bottles and everything else that comes with bottle feeding. So although there are great benefits for a mother to choose to breastfeed for her child as well, there are also many reasons that a mother may choose to bottle feed. It's convenient. So when compared to breastfeeding, unless a woman chooses to pump the breast milk, she's the only one who can feed her child. Whereas with bottle feeding, when the baby's up at 3 a.m. crying, she's not the only one that has to get up. the father can get up and feed the child. Or if she needs to go to work or has to run an errand, she can leave the child with someone else and they can mix that bottle and feed the baby. It also takes less time when compared to pumping the breast milk because you have to find time in between your schedule as well as the baby's schedule. So you have to sit down and actually pump the breast milk. So it's a lot easier just to make a bottle and go on. It's also less stressful. Mothers tend to be concerned about whether or not their child is starving because you can't clearly see how much milk the child is getting. Whereas with bottle feeding, you can clearly see how much is going in. There's also a lot more support for bottle feeding because it's a very big controversy right now that breastfeeding shouldn't be done in public, but it's a natural thing and just favor bottle feeding. So my project, I made 91 blankets, I made 100 burp rags, and 104 hats, and I'll actually pass them. So the decision for my product came from my grandma Louise. I remember going to her house and making these hats when I was younger. I do remember it being a lot easier when I was younger. But I thought that I needed a challenge, so I added blankets and burp rags, which was definitely a challenge. This is me with my final product. I have 2 stacks on both sides, and it was all the blankets. I have my hats, and the burp rags over there. I donated all of these items to OMC on January 24th, and I had 73 hours worth of work sitting next to me. 18 was with my mentor, and when a baby had been born about 10 minutes before I arrived, so they took one of each of the items to them. And then I was also interviewed by a woman from the West Plains Daily Quill. And then I was also interviewed by a woman from the hospital that put it in the paper as well. The nurses were thrilled when I walked in and saw how many blankets and burp rags and hats that I had made. It was pretty exciting. It was an exhausting product to do, but once I got it done and saw how excited the nurses were, it was definitely worth it. So I faced a few challenges with my product as well, such as fabric. Fabric isn't cheap, and I did have a few donations, but they only equaled about 1/4 of my product, so the rest was out of pocket, and that's why we only did 91 blankets instead of making it all the way to 100. Time was another factor. At the beginning of the year, I played varsity tennis, so I had a lot of tournaments, a lot of matches, and my mentor actually homeschools her kids, so I had to find time between her schedule and mine to meet with her in order to get my hours in. So overall, I learned a lot with this project, such as time management skills, but I also had fun doing it. This project meant a lot to the nurses as well as the families that received the blankets, and I think it was great. I had a lot of fun. And after researching all there is to know about breastfeeding, I don't understand why people don't encourage women to breastfeed in public as long as they're covered up. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? This is my work side. I forgot about that. Yes.
So back in your opening statement, you said a story about it was the sales clerk, took the baby and said that so whatever happened with that story?
I actually have no idea because on the article that I read, it never told the ending. So I don't
Really?
know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay. Interesting.
Any other questions?
Yes, yes, I'm gonna ask one more. So, I'm sorry, so just to kind of recap, you learned how to sew for a second time?
Yeah,
Or you
actually,
knew how to sew when you were younger, but?
I didn't know. I knew how to crochet the hats. So with the hats, I remember doing that with my grandma. So it's like a loom, a circle loom, and you just wrap the yarn around it and do so many stitches. And then with the blankets, we use 2 pieces. It's like a yard each. Is that what it was? Yeah, on each side, and then we stitch them together and make the blankets. But I didn't know how to do that at all.
Right.
And I had to relearn how to make the hats because I completely forgot.
So is this something you might look at, later on down the road as a side job, a small side job,
Honestly, if I had time, I could see doing it again. The reaction from the nurses was really exciting, especially the one that I just saw her when she grabbed the items and ran to take it to the new baby, so I didn't see her to thank her for doing that, but that was pretty exciting.
Very good.
So what are your future plans after graduation?
I actually am gonna go to OTC, and I wanna be a nurse in labor and delivery, and then eventually I'm gonna go to MSU and become an anesthesiologist. Is that